Hey everyone, welcome. First of all, thank you for making time to be here, even though it's summer and probably most of you have vacations with your children. I would love to also say hi to Kaylee and give her a big thanks for being here with us today, for making the time to be with us. And yay, hi Kaylee.
Hi, everybody. It's actually so fun to see everyone's origin here on the side. People from all over the world. It's pretty incredible with age ranges that are very different. Having a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old, very different. It's good to know because Watermellow can definitely be viewed as a baby swimming lesson program, but it's actually learn to swim for anyone, any age. So it's good knowledge. It's good knowledge for a lot of these age groups.
Yay. So, first of all, I will say a few words about Kaylee. So, I give you a little information who is talking to you today, and then I will give you, Kaylee, the space to share your presentation. Kaylee, you are a lifelong swimmer. You are an experienced instructor. You founded K&K Swim School. You founded Watermellow, which is an online swim school that helps parents become their baby's first and best swim teacher. You have more than 15 years of experience. You are known for your gentle, child-centered approach to swimming. I know that you want to make water play safe, joyful, connected from the very beginning. What did I forget? What do you want to add?
Absolutely. I think you did an incredible job.
Perfect. Then I will give you your space. You can share your presentation and we will see the questions after that.
Wonderful. All right. So I am Kaylee Kennedy. Just like Lucy said, I own a couple of swim schools. I've been in the aquatic industry and teaching for between 15 to 20 years now. It's been my life's passion. And when I had my own children, I realized that it is my life's work because I built such an amazing connection with my children in the water and I taught them how to swim through love and respect. A little bit of challenge, but at the end of the day, we connected really well as a team, my kids, and I actually learned how to be a more understanding and open mom. So today we'll talk a lot, I guess, about submersions, how we teach the hardest part of a Learn to Swim curriculum. It's our secret sauce, getting kids to really understand their breath control and what their true potential is. The swim schools that I own and I operate, we've taught more than 500,000 lessons over the last 15 years, and we've taught thousands of kids to swim across Canada. Building relationships and connections truly is at the forefront of what we do professionally. We teach parents to teach their babies to swim. We teach new learners, no matter their age, how to go underwater by an instructor. It's basically our entire program is adapted for the learner. And so that's what we'll be talking a lot today is about how to teach through connection and with intention and love. It was true understanding of cues and signals that the child is comfortable or uncomfortable in certain situations and what to do with that. So our mission at Watermellow became to educate parents then all over the world to swim with their kids because once Watermellow kind of expanded in Canada, we realized that we could actually touch people from all over the world. Our focus-centered approach of intention and love and teaching submersions went across the world because at the end of the day, everybody needs to learn how to swim. Like I said, it all starts with breath control. We're going to hop into our tips and tricks and how to teach submersions really quickly. Breath control is basically how we use our nose and our mouth when we are around the water. We are nose breathers, most of us on land. So teaching a child or a new learner, does not matter their age, to swim really starts with the way that they're breathing. If they can't breathe, then they panic. If they panic, they drown. Ultimately. So we need to teach a very mindful and centered approach to submersions and being in the water so that our swimmers can make good judgment calls and understand their physical capabilities when they're in any body of water. So what is breath control? It's basically the ability to go underwater without ingesting water during or after the submersion. Where do we start? It all comes from monitoring the breathing. Like I said, we're watching and listening that nose and the mouth breathing. We do so by teaching submersions. I really do feel like it's exposure therapy, that we really do need to expose our new swimmers to getting water over their face in order to understand how to react positively and learn how to explore, make mistakes, learn from your mistakes. Our brains and our bodies are intuitively very smart. We know what works and what doesn't, even if we're not logically understanding the reasons as to why we're coming up with certain responses. So exploration helps our kids, the little ones, really learn how to breathe around water, because when they make mistakes, they learn very quickly from them. Your job as the parent is truly to explain what their exploration and what their experience actually is. But that's what we're going to be doing today. Is I'm going to explain to you, I'm going to explain the natural way of teaching your child to go underwater, and then the natural reactions that your child will have when they're going underwater and how they breathe around it, so that you know that they're safe and they're learning at the same time. Monitoring breathing, the way that we do so is in 3 easy steps. We listen, we watch, and we feel. You can feel your child's breathing by just holding their side body. You can feel their inhales and their exhales just by the rise of their chin, and you can see the way that they're breathing just by the way that they close their eyes. You can hear them by the deep inhale, deep exhale. So watching how they breathe, seeing how they breathe, feeling how they breathe before, during, and after every submersion is the key to success. Doesn't necessarily mean that you need to react immediately, but it's to know when you should be reacting and how you should be reacting. So we have a submersion routine. So at K&K Swim School in Watermellow, we have a program, and it's called Swimful. And our Swimful curriculum has to do with swimming mindfully, and it all starts with breathing and breath control. We have a 5-step program on how to teach the child how to go underwater and when to know to come up to breathe, and then how to just repeat that sequence, one submersion after the next, to be able to create a long swim. And so it goes down in 5 easy steps. We simply tell them to take a breath. We lift them physically, submerge them for 3 seconds while counting slow. We let them know when they need to come up and take another breath, and we listen for them to exhale before resubmerging them back underwater. Every submersion is the same expectation. The idea is that if they're underwater for 3 seconds, the first submersion in the swim, they're underwater for 3 seconds all the way until the end of their swim, because that basically creates almost like a routine. I grew up as a dancer, so if I can think in 8 counts and I can think of every beat of the 8 count in order to learn a routine, it's the same thing that I wanted to create for our swimmers when they're in the water, is building that expectation is it will build their positive reaction ultimately when they're going underwater. Like I said, the idea is to inhale from their mouth, to submerge their face while holding their breath confidently, and then to be able to resurface and exhale.
Take a breath. Good job. Very good.
So Levi is 4 months, and this is his second lesson. A lot of how we teach our submersions is using a cup. The reason why we do that is we don't want the child to go completely underwater and the parent to fully submerge their child without knowing what it feels like to have water over the face. Some kids are more sensitive than others. Some don't like water close to their nose, and some are really great and don't really care. But we want to make sure that we're teaching all of our swimmers very similarly to be inclusive with what makes them comfortable, and then how to read the reactions. So if you heard really well, Levi's mom said, take a breath. So she's preparing Levi by giving a verbal cue of take a breath. We use that cue to cue the cup submersions, any underwater submersions, and the early stages of a float. I say that because I don't always use the take a breath cue once our swimmers are very used to going underwater, because the next cue that follows this is the most important one. Usually I say that the take a breath cue is more so for the parent or for the teacher that's teaching the child, because it tells the teacher that they're preparing the child and communicating with them before actually submerging them underwater. Having that verbal cue is very helpful for the connection that the pair will soon develop, but the next cue is the connection that they're actually going to be able to bridge in order to go underwater. But the take a breath cue, very important when you're teaching cup submersions, underwater submersions, and then the early stages of just floating and letting them do their thing. The 3 monitoring methods, remember, we're listening, watching, and feeling for when the child is holding their breath. When we tell a child to take a breath, they're not going to actually take a breath. Like I said, this is more of a cue and a way for the adult or for the teacher to be able to communicate that's what the expectation is. What the child will do when water pours over their face is they will automatically stop breathing. I'll talk about that in a second. I'll talk about it during the submersion aspect of this teaching. But the idea is that if we keep telling them to take a breath, giving them a second in order to do, and then pouring water over their face, the idea is they're going to hold their breath. So the signs that they're holding their breath, because they have this reflex, is that their eyes will close, their face will scrunch. You won't hear them breathing, and their head and their body might even face away from the parent when the cue is coming out. So when I say take a breath, or they see the cup that's in my hand, they might turn their face because they know that they need to brace themselves for holding their breath. So the physical cue, which is to me the most important cue, is that feeling of falling. The physical cue of the lift is to communicate to the child to inhale and then hold their breath. So the cue of take a breath is simply just verbal. It's good communication skills to talk to your kids, but the main one is the lift. So if I lift you, you need to know and brace immediately for a 3-second submersion. So to communicate that, we want to teach the child that also when we're lifting, the child's natural reaction, just like when you're at the top of a roller coaster, is to inhale a big, big breath. It's the same thing that we want these kids to learn, that when I lift you and I'm inhaling with you, that's your time that you also need to be inhaling. So that physical cue is very important.
Big smile, big breath.
So I'll play this video one more time, sorry. So this is Arkham, he's 6 months old, and this is his 6th lesson. The reason why I'm putting lesson numbers in these video examples is because the cup submersion can be used for quite a while in order to just condition the response of holding the breath while underwater. Submersions are very used with that lift cue because you're actually putting them underneath the surface of the water. And we only introduce that after maybe 4 or 5 lessons, depending on the age of the swimmer.
Big smile, big breath.
So that's a really cool video, and we'll talk about how we monitor that they took and held their breath in a second, but you can actually see a lot of the signs that Arkham took and held his breath at the beginning and at the end of that video. Now, this is Eli. He's 8 months old, and this is in a pool. I didn't teach Eli in the bathtub. And you can also see that I didn't give him the take a breath cue on that one. Instead, I just gave him a lift. It has nothing to do with the lesson number. It just had to do with the amount of exposure he's had with going underwater with me. And that was something that I taught Eli, probably from one of the first few classes, is that when he understood the lift, he understood he had to take and hold his breath. So Penelope is 14 months here. She had about the same number of classes as Eli in this video. And you can see that she's jumping off of me. So by me lifting Eli, it's the same movement as though 14-month-old Penelope is actually jumping off the surface, jumping off of a surface and landing right into the water. So this is her lift cue as she's doing it on her own. Oh.
And ready? Big smile.
So she jumps, submerges, and then gently comes to Mummy's t-shirt. All right, so what you probably noticed, especially in the first and the second video, not so much with Penelope, is they open their mouth wide, they close their eyes, and they tilt their chin. So when I lift them, they know that they need to brace themselves because they're about to go underwater. Their chest ends up moving and taking a big before I go ahead and submerge them. So that's something that I'm feeling here when my hands are just around Eli's chest. Understanding that the child inhaled before the submersion is actually not as easy as you would think, because it's such a split second between the time that you lift them and the time that you're submerging them. The biggest indicator that the child inhales before the submersion is the exhale after the submersion. So if the child comes up and goes after the submersion, it means that they inhaled before going under the water. So that's the biggest indicator. The 1, 2, 3. So we went take a breath, lift, now we're submerging. The submersion is the scariest part for most parents or any educator, to be honest, because you're putting a child underwater where they're not able to breathe. And if they do inhale, our fear is that they're going to inhale the water into their lungs. Submersion, the reason why we teach submersion with the cup and then going underneath the water is ultimately to teach them how to swim. So just like how you saw with Eli and then Penelope, where they were able to float for a good second before I recovered them, that's teaching them that they're able to actually move and pull themselves through the water while holding their breath and keeping their face below the surface. So the submersion is the magic. It's the magic. It's how all of our kids learn how to swim. So when we put floaties on our kids, we're actually preventing them to going underwater properly and holding their breath properly, because it's not a real aid that's helping them stay above the water. And it doesn't really teach them how to submerge for quite a long time and teach them what their boundaries are, because they're not necessarily swimming. That's just my take when we're using flotation devices. But either way, submersion, the reason why we teach it is to swim. That is the main purpose. So I mentioned before that we have reflexes. Babies under the age of 6 months old have the bradycardic reflex, and then that turns into the dive response in young kids and adults. If you go underwater, you will not be able to just take a big inhale in. You won't be able to consciously inhale while you're underneath the water unless you're underwater for a very long time and your brain just automatically needs you to take a breath. But that reflex is what stops us from breathing altogether. So when I said before that when we give the cue of take a breath and the child doesn't necessarily know what that means to take a breath, what we're trying to teach them is when I use that tone of voice and that word patterning, they're going to turn the reflex into a conditioned response of taking a breath and holding it. But if I were to pour just a cup of water over their face with no cues, no lift, they would automatically stop breathing. Either they will have 3 seconds worth of air in their lungs and they'll be able to come back up and exhale, or they don't have very long, maybe a second or two, and then they come back up and inhale, right? Because it depends, it's 50-50 shot. Either you took a breath before I dumped the water on your face, or you didn't take a breath and you exhaled before I dumped the water on your face. So the submersion can go for 1 to 3 to 5 seconds, depending on whether or not the child took their breath before going underwater. But that's the reason why we introduce with cups. We start very slow. We progress the length of time that the child is underwater from 1 to 5 seconds based on the number of times your swimmer has had exposure with going underwater. And you can toggle them. You can do a 1 second submersion and then a 2 second submersion after, then go back to 1 second submersion, all while paying attention to how the child breathes after the submersion. And we'll get to the post-submersion response in a second. But like I said, the idea is to give the verbal cue, give the lift, introduce submersions either with a cup or an underwater submersion, and slowly with a 1 to 3 second submersion. The other thing is that you need to be really fun. I think that turning any reflex, which is a stress response, turning any reflex into a conditioned response, it needs to be an enjoyable time.